Buenos dias, Jim, and thank you for joining us today at Business Spotlight Series. Today, I'm excited to introduce Jim Law, founder of Find a Player. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, Javi. Buenos dias. That's
Buenos-
my Spanish done for the day.
Very good accent, very good
Yeah.
accent. So, Jim, tell us, how did you end up with this idea of Find a Player?
I think, I've always played a lot of sport. Played badminton for Scotland as a junior and, captain of the school football team and played golf teams, tennis teams. Always loved sport, but specifically team sport. And I think that the idea for the business came from a personal pain point, as most businesses do, where moved to a new city, lost all my games of football, my badminton club, guy I played squash with, and was getting invited to a lot of things, but it was always at the wrong time, and realised that there were lots of clubs and people who run games and activities looking for players, and guys like myself looking to get involved in more things, but there was no easy way to find them. So just from there, we started looking at the market and realised there was no product really out there that was a network for grassroots sport and connecting people through activity and helping to build communities. So as I said, through a combination of naivety, stupidity, and hubris, decided that we would go and try and build a product to connect up this market and solve the problem. So that's kind of where it came from, and then it kind of grew arms and legs after that. And when you start digging into the product and the market, the number of use cases and variables actually multiply out really quickly. So it becomes a bit of a beast in terms of multiple sports, multiple challenges, multiple issues we're trying to resolve, and then also the partners we want to work with. So yeah, it becomes a very big job very quickly. So yeah, that's kind of how we started.
Brilliant. And who would use the app? Who is it targeted for?
Really, anybody that wants to get more active. The sort of two core target areas are really individual users who are trying to find things to do, people to do them with. And then on the other side of the equation it is people running games and activities, and also clubs. So one of the things we've seen with clubs is that their number one challenge is recruiting members and growing their user base. So really it's helping to digitize grassroots sports content. So if you're a club, typically, clubs still sort of revert back to word of mouth, flyers, posters, and posts on Facebook. What we're trying to do is digitize that so that there is a sort of bespoke network for grassroots sport. So you can list your activities, you can list your club, and then in the same way you would go into Uber and find a taxi, or go into hotels.com and find a place to stay. You can go on and find, things to do, clubs to do them in, and people to play with. So just trying to provide that real customized network that's built specifically for sports, and trying to, look at all the problems that clubs face, organisers face, and make it easy for them to do the admin every week. So send invites, track numbers, group chat, payments, all that stuff. And then going forward, being able to find and book facilities as well. So really looking at the issues that exist within both sides of the market, and then trying to build a product and a platform which solves those problems.
Brilliant. And how do you expand, geographically? Because obviously you need to have critical mass in a particular geographical area to find
Yeah.
a player, right? So how do you go about the geographical expansion? You mentioned that 1/3 of your 70,000 users are based in London. So how do you
Yeah.
go about that?
Well, there's a guy called Andrew Chen who talks about this, a book called The Cold Start Problem. And basically you have to build up usage within small, what he calls micro networks. And then you have to solve the problem on multiple sides. So if you are an organizer, you want to be able to find more players, and you want to be able to simplify your admin. So if we can solve that problem for you, then it basically that fills one side of the network, and that gets you to come back every week. And then that expands the sort of use case. We can then bring in other people and say there are games available. So it's trying to balance up the different sides of the network, and ultimately we do that by providing tools which are useful to the people who we want to stick on our network. So they come for the tools, and then they stay for the network. So it's a challenging problem, and that's why building a marketplace business is historically very hard. But once you do it, it's some of the biggest businesses in the world are all marketplace businesses. Uber and Just Eat and Airbnb, all marketplace businesses. So that's what we're trying to do.
Brilliant. And tell me, Jim, what's in your journey? Can you share with us one of the biggest challenges you had to face?
You're going to ask me that, and it's like, I mean, if you want to talk about challenges, we could be here all day. I think ultimately the sort of two biggest ones are building the product. Building the product is a monumental effort, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of commitment. You can do it badly, and most people do it badly, and shove something out in the market that then doesn't really stick and people don't use. It's functional, but it's not something that people want to use and come back to regularly. So for me, retention's always the hardest thing. The second bit, once you've built the product, is then actually market adoption. So making people aware of it, getting it out there, and actually building up that network so that you're balancing the solution on both sides. So that's then I would say the second bit, and then the third bit, which is probably the hardest in my opinion in terms of the market we're in, is changing entrenched behaviours, especially group behaviours, because if you've got a group of people and they're all using WhatsApp or Facebook and they've been using that for 10 years, trying to get a group of 20 people to change to a new product en masse is really, really challenging. And I think to try and solve that, you have to build an overwhelming case for your product, so that that change of behaviour has to be driven by an overwhelming set of benefits, really, on all sides, and not just for the organizer. There has to be multiple benefits for all the people within the groups as well. So I think those for me are probably the three biggest challenges. So the product, and then building up the marketplace, and then actually changing behaviours.
Yeah, definitely. What was you had to go through COVID. You were pre-COVID,
Yeah.
and you survived COVID. How?
Yeah.
Do you have to make any changes the way you were running the business? Do you have to pivot it? How did it affect the business?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously it had a massive impact in terms of there was no sport for 2 years, best part of 2 years. What that allowed us to do, and we were fairly fortunate, we got some funding from Scottish Enterprise at a sort of good time and a bad time, because we got it at a good time in terms of, it helped us through COVID, but it was a bad time in terms of there was no sport for 2 years. So we literally, couldn't do anything in terms of product growth. What it did do was allow us to sort of step out the business, and instead of working in the business, we were working on the business. So it let us step out, and actually we had a lot of very similar conversations with potential commercial partners, which were, we love the tech and the platform and the concept behind it, but we don't really care about the wider application. So if I'm Tennis Scotland, I don't care about all the games of rugby and the people that are playing football. They just want to provide a network for tennis players and tennis clubs and tennis facilities. So we had to go and look at how we could deliver that, and actually provide something that works for all these commercial partners. And we had to go and think about A, how we built that, and then B, how we delivered it. So it gave us the opportunity to sort of step back for a year and go, well, actually, if we want to service all these commercial relationships and be able to grow and scale with these partners, we need to be able to do this. So that kind of let us step out the business and say, well, actually, let's pause on the consumer side and let's focus on the commercial side for a bit. And we started building to that end, and that's now massively beginning to bear fruit with some of the conversations we're having, like globally, not just in Scotland and UK. That there are global organisations that we're looking at working with in terms of them using our platform.
Brilliant. And Jim, say 5 years from now, where do you see find a player? Where do you see the business?
Well, I mean, I've been doing this long enough to know how long things take. What we want to be ultimately is LinkedIn or Facebook for sports. We want to be the default network where if you want to participate in sports, if you want to run your club, if you want to grow your sport, we provide the tools to help you do that. And for me, what we're building is really first person data, which will support all that. But also, I'm very passionate that we do not go down the Facebook road of sort of sucking all the data out for our own ends. I really want to be able to put that data that we generate in terms of participation, players, clubs, etc., put it back into the hands of the clubs and the governing bodies themselves so that they can actually commercialise that and leverage that data for the good of their sport and the good of their clubs, because they're getting no help at the moment. So that's really what we want to do. We want to be a sort of power for good and a long-term partner for grassroots sport that actually helps them digitise and grow and commercialise.
Brilliant. And what would you say to your 18-year-old self?
God, what would I say to my 18-year-old self? That is a good question. I think probably the one thing I would say that I think is Scottish people generally, we don't have a lot of belief in ourselves. And I was speaking to a colleague who is based out in Silicon Valley last night actually, and we're all kind of taught not to think too big and not to really go for it and to stay in your lane. I think what I've learned actually probably in the last 2 or 3 years is that actually I really understand what I'm doing in terms of the market and the product. I always have concerns and worries that I'm not good enough to get us there. But I think in terms of my confidence in my own ability and what we're doing as a product and a company is I'm now fairly strong in the belief I know what we need to build and the issues we need to solve, and that when we have the right conversations, I already have a fairly good expectation that I'll know what they're going to say in terms of the problems they're facing. So it'd probably be to have a bit more belief in yourself and a bit more sort of commitment to what you're doing. That I think historically I've been quite easily swayed by people who I have perceived as much more experienced than me, that maybe don't understand the market as well as I do. So I think it's always that balance of listening to people and taking the advice and the opinion, but also having belief that you actually know what you're doing a wee bit more. But I think that comes with experience and time. So if I'd have told myself that at 18, I'd probably be like, yeah, I know what I'm doing anyway. So I don't know if I'd actually listened to that advice when I was 18. But yeah, I think ultimately the thing that drives you and gives you the commitment you need is having a fundamental belief in what you're doing and the benefit of what you're doing, not just for yourself, but actually for the greater good of the country and the community. That actually I think sport and activity is massively important, and that physical connection and community is really, really fundamentally required in all our lives, and just being able to help people do that and find things they care about and the communities they can be part of.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You touched a point about what one is not good at, and what was it Richard Branson who said, recruit your weaknesses?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think building a team around that is absolutely critical. There's lots of things that I'm not good at. I'm not a very good manager. I'm a pretty good leader, I think, but not a good manager. And the marketing side of things, I think most Scottish people are typically not very good at self-promotion and bigging themselves up. And, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, when people find out about a product, they're like, how do we not know about this? And it's, you know, because I'm not not very good at shouting about it, and I know that's one of the things that, you know, we need to get better at. But I think fundamentally, you know, we need the resources to do that, and that's kind of what we're working on at the moment, is getting the product to the right shape, that, you know, we're now ready to go and shout about it and tell people about it, and hopefully be one of these, you know, overnight successes that have taken, you know, 8-9 years, but suddenly it's everywhere, and that's kind of what we're aiming for. But the product has to stand up to scrutiny before you can really start pouring a lot of money into the marketing bucket. So that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Jim, it's been a real pleasure to have you join us here at Business Spotlight Series and sharing your experience
Yeah,
in your journey with us today. Thank you so much.
it's a pleasure. Thanks very much for having me, Javi. Appreciate it.